Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to AVA Webinar Wednesdays. My name is Jason Novick, and I am the AVA Webinar Coordinator. We apologize for the delay in beginning with the technical difficulties, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm joining you today from the traditional and ancestral territory, uh, University of Calgary of Tsuut'ina First Nation, and on behalf of AVA, I want to begin by acknowledging that on a national level, we encourage all Canadians and visitors to Canada to learn about the Indigenous peoples of the lands on which they live, work, or visit, and become engaged allies together. And the focus of today's webinar is innovations in intimate partner violence research, centering lived experience and capacity building and large-scale projects. And we are joined today by Dr. Zoe Hilton, Dr. Elnaz Moghimi, Elke, Sevil, Deljavin, Jaden, Chong, and Nikoo, Aghaei from the Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. And I will now turn it over to all of you.
Thanks, Jason. And hi, everyone. Thank you for attending our talk today. My name is, as Jason said, Dr. Elnaz Moghimi, and I'm a research scientist and adjunct assistant professor. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. But beyond that, I'm also a novice piano player and an avid Vincent van Gogh fan, which you can see in the images behind me. To me, co-research with people with lived experience means a balance between amplifying some voices and softening others to evoke meaningful change.
Hello, I'm sorry my camera does not seem to be working, but I'm Zoe Hilton. I'm research chair in forensic mental health at Waypoint. I also love to be outdoors in all seasons, also on a rainy November day like we have right here in Central Ontario. And for me, co-research is about learning to hear from those people who are affected by intimate partner violence and by the impacts of research itself and of doing research together.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elke, and I'm a research psychometrist at the Waypoint Research Institute. But I'm also a mother, grandmother, and I am someone who loves gardening, who loves cooking and baking, and I love being outdoors as well. And what co-research means to me is helping people to move on from being a mere research participant, but to be a valued research partner in a co-research setting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sevil, and I'm the research coordinator on this project. I'm also someone who loves the outdoors, family time, and really good food. And to me, co-research means making decisions together, learning from each other, and building projects as true partners.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikoo. I'm a student researcher and designer on the team. I'm also a medical student at Queen's. I also love art, volleyball, and I would love to discover some new music every now and then. Co-research to me means involving those who will directly benefit from the research at every step of the way.
Hi everyone, my name is Jaden and I'm a communications and digital media specialist at Waypoint. I'm someone who really enjoys traveling and exploring new places, and I also like good food and good music. To me, co-research is creating safe spaces where people with lived experiences can feel empowered to contribute to research.
And our team is based at Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care, which is a teaching hospital in Penetanguishene, Ontario, providing specialized mental health, addiction, and geriatric care. Waypoint has one of the largest forensic mental health programs in the country and is the province of Ontario's only provider of high secure forensic mental health care services. Our team is part of the Waypoint Research Institute, which is housed at Waypoint. Our presentations today will focus on our work in the intimate partner violence space. We'll start with our capacity building efforts, starting with the RESPECT study, which aimed to develop a framework to partner with people with lived experience in research. We'll also look at co-research in practice through the IPV service study, as well as building connections with our community and our knowledge mobilization efforts through art and storytelling with the Our IPV Story campaign. All of our capacity building efforts contributed to our ability to obtain funding to build Canada's first mental health anti-violence hub, which we will also speak more on in this talk. And throughout all our projects, partnering with people with lived experience is a key driver of our work. In the same way that we as researchers present with a multitude of intersectional identities, those with experiences of IPV also need their social identities acknowledged to ensure that the work we do together is non-tokenistic, considers the whole person, achieves reciprocity, and adapts to or disrupts institutional guidelines and systems to better support these relationships and outcomes. Our list of learnings continue to grow as we move forward with our projects. For our first talk, I'd like to invite Zoe and Elke to speak about the RESPECT study.
Great. Thank you very much, Elnaz, for this wonderful introduction. Today, Zoe and I will tell you a little bit about the RESPECT study. And RESPECT stands for Research Framework for Engaging Intimate Partner Violence Survivors as Partners in Empowering Collaborative Transformation. The project was a collaboration between academic and organization-based researchers at the Waypoint Centre for Mental Health Care in Ontario and PATH, the Provincial Association of Transition Houses and Services of Saskatchewan, as well as a lived experiences researcher and counselor also from Saskatchewan. And the project was in part supported by SSHRC. Intimate partner violence research often involves survivors as participants who have experienced violence during critical moments in their lives. And studies show that these individuals are typically motivated to participate in research and view their involvement positively. But what about involving survivors more extensively in the research process, from study design to knowledge translation and to dissemination? Establishing an ethical framework for involving victims and survivors as partners in intimate partner violence research can empower them to influence the research agenda and ensure that services better meet their needs. Academic and organization-based researchers may have their own personal experiences with IPV, but what we are referring to here is doing research together with people whose primary expertise is the lived experience. The objectives of our study were to first understand the current extent of survivor involvement in IPV research partnerships, to understand barriers and facilitators, to examine existing collaborative research models involving lived experiences researchers, especially IPV survivors, generate practical and co-created recommendations for engaging with survivors and lived experiences researchers in intimate partner violence, and to ultimately co-create a framework for intimate partner violence research partnerships. So here's our team. You will recognize some of the faces, but we also had 4 students who were instrumental in the project's success. The team regularly met to discuss all research activities, including the RAB application, method, study subjects. We screened nearly 2,000 titles and abstracts, evaluated 250 full-text articles, and extracted data from 26 articles. We found that 50% of the studies used a community-based participatory research model. However, most studies described the involvement of lived experience researchers as consultant or collaborators, and only 4% involved them as equal partners. So the scoping review also identified several factors that promote successful partnerships among co-researchers, as well as some barriers they face. Facilitators included opportunities for advocacy, skill development, and the acquisition of new competencies, having a sense of contributing to research and projects, being valued and respected, encountering trust through open communication, diversity, and shared experiences and identities, and the availability of resources and grant funding. And key barriers to co-research included lack of interest and competing priorities, issues related to trust, respect, and challenges, and challenging power dynamics, funding challenges, including insufficient compensation for lived experiences researchers, and tight funding timelines faced by organization-based researchers. There are lots of facilitators and barriers. So we identified 3 common models of participatory research to assess the applicability in working with survivors of intimate partner violence. One is the patient-oriented research, some of you might be familiar with, which is primarily applied in healthcare settings and focuses on actively engaging patients, caregivers, and families as partners in the research process. The second one was participatory action research, whose approach is utilized in broader community settings and is often used to address social issues. And finally, the community-based participatory research, which involves specific community stakeholders and tackles community needs and priorities. You can click on the, we will show you a link later where you can get the little handout if you're interested in the summary of these models. But next, we held a roundtable with survivors and researchers where we reflected on the current frameworks, gathered new insights and suggestions, and discussed the shared values needed for a new framework for co-research specifically with IPV survivors. We used the knowledge gathered from the scoping review and roundtable to co-create a draft of a new framework of values and recommendations, which we then shared back with the roundtable participants via email and video presentation for feedback and incorporated their suggestions in the next draft. And then finally, we conducted 2 focus groups where we refined the draft framework, established priorities, modified language, and added important considerations that may previously have been overlooked. We also held several meetings within our co-research team to discuss the language we were using to describe researchers and how best to formulate and communicate the framework. So today we will share with you the 5 foundations of this new framework, and I'll hand it over to Zoe.
Thank you, Elke. So the new framework is founded on recognizing the needs and the roles of lived experience researchers and organization-affiliated researchers, so that research is a respectful, ethical, and equitable experience for all researchers. Foundation 1 is centering safety, well-being, and emotional support. It's important that lived experience researchers feel physically safe, emotionally safe, culturally and psychologically safe from the outset of the research and during all phases of the research process. This requires organization-affiliated researchers to plan for safety ahead of time with protocols that can then be reviewed and approved by lived experience researchers. Advising lived experience researchers of the pros and cons of involvement in research provides them with information needed to be able to select their own level of involvement. We recommend that organization-affiliated researchers offer lived experience researchers support if they experience distress during their involvement, and they need to budget for this support in research funding proposals. Foundation 2 is sharing power between organization-affiliated researchers and lived experience researchers. This captures recommendations that emphasize lived experience researchers as being valued knowledge holders and leaders and decision makers and equal contributors to the research process and to the research direction. Let research questions come from lived experience researchers and from their communities. Share ideas, share ownership, credit, and access to findings equally. Foundation 3 is respect, trust, and relationship building. Allow for the time that it takes to build authentic relationships. Authentic relationships are not transactional. They have no hidden motives. This foundation also requires recognizing and respecting boundaries between lived experience researchers and organization-affiliated researchers, because there are limits to what we would call dual relationships, such as we can't be in a therapeutic relationship as well as being co-researchers, which is something that might need to be navigated, especially between lived experience researchers and community-based researchers. Academic-based researchers also need to recognize how the demands of getting grants and publications might conflict with relational goals and work to manage any conflicts. Foundation 4 is ensuring equity and accessibility throughout the research process. This is especially needed when it comes to ensuring that groups that have been historically excluded or marginalized are meaningfully included and that they are respected and prioritized. This can be facilitated by compensating lived experience researchers fairly and minimizing barriers to their participation. So not just compensating for their time, but perhaps it might mean budgeting for covering childcare as an example. When sharing research findings, do so in a way that is accessible, and this can include using online platforms, but also checking the readability and accessibility of the content. And do this in all communications with researchers and their communities, not just the knowledge translation phase, but throughout the research, because there's a lot about research dynamics and the academic processes that may not be clear to people outside of these organizations. The last of the 5 foundations is respecting and celebrating diverse identities. Keep in mind that the diversity among lived experience researchers and the specific identity that holds the most salience for them can vary from person to person and from situation to situation. Taking an intersectional lens here is really key, as well as the whole research team trying to be reflexive about how all our own identities shape our research practices. Strive for diverse teams and provide training to the organization affiliated researchers to facilitate cultural humility and sensitivity, and work this into how you engage in research, right down to the details of all the research team interactions. So thank you for listening about the RESPECT study. And if you would like to learn more or stay in touch, here's how to contact me and Elke. And this code takes you to the RESPECT project webpage.
All right, thank you, Zoe and Elke. So moving on to the IPV service study, I thought it would be valuable to also share some of the lessons I learned in exploring different forms of partnerships and connections in this project. Our team is very multidisciplinary. We have clinicians, psychometrists, people with expertise in digital mental health, a patient advocate with expertise in the forensic and criminal justice systems, students, trainees, and a community advisory team comprising of diverse people with lived experience of intimate partner violence. And putting together this team really led me to my first lesson on the importance of leveraging existing relationships, the value of mixing different disciplines, and having the same gap or issue you want to address be viewed from multiple different lenses. And this really builds a community that offers different perspectives on the issues and areas we're all passionate about. With respect to our vision, we noticed a significant increase in IPV, particularly after the COVID pandemic. At the same time, the data indicated the need for specialized IPV services, but the service needs of those affected by IPV are often overlooked and understudied. And so we were able to obtain funding to really go straight to the source. We implemented an intersectional approach focusing on adults who either engaged in IPV, survived it, or had both experiences in a romantic relationship lasting at least 3 months. We recruited from the community, but also opened recruitment at our hospital. As well, those who engaged in IPV were referred to the study through IPV rehabilitation programs. We asked participants to complete a demographic survey and to engage in a 60-minute interview for us to explore their service needs and how they may have been influenced by their social identities. During the study, we quickly realized that participant recruitment is very challenging, and there were many times where I felt my hands were tied. Some of the barriers included access issues with respect to the technology needed for the virtual interviews. There was also a lack of trust and knowledge about our team and project, as this was my first project in the IPV space as an early career researcher. As well, IPV is a very stigmatized and taboo topic, and there is an emotional toll in sharing experiences related to it that needed to be considered. And usually when you read publications and protocols, you see that emails and social media are the predominant ways to recruit. We realized that's simply not enough for this project and needed to go back to the drawing table to really hone in on human connections. And this is really where our conversations and consults with our community advisory team and patient advocate led me to my second lesson, and that centering lived experience inherently has benefits not just for the project, but for all the people involved. And these conversations led us to addressing many of the barriers to participation. With respect to access issues, we learned ways to respect anonymity in the digital space, the importance of being flexible in how we compensated participants, working with community organizations to provide technology to people who may not have had access otherwise. Through referrals and word of mouth, we started to build trust with participants, organizations, and community gatekeepers who played a critical role in our connections with people who engaged in IPV. To reduce the emotional toll, we also learned ways to mitigate re-traumatization, and one example was through the language we used. You'll notice I use the term engaged in the act of IPV instead of perpetrator, and that was suggested as a more non-stigmatizing approach to relationship building. And the result was that we had a very diverse sample. More than half of our 24 participants were non-white and Indigenous, 25% were men, and 9 individuals were referred through community rehabilitation programs. Interestingly, of those 9 participants, only 1 self-reported as engaging in the act. The rest either reported having dual experiences or were survivor victims. And beyond recruitment, these connections also led me to my third lesson, which was the importance of humanized and equitable research giving rise to change-oriented ideas. For instance, our team meetings weren't just focused on the project itself, but also current events surrounding IPV, which served as a reminder for why we do what we do. We also allocated leadership roles across our team to highlight different expertise. For example, our patient advocate provided compassionate interviewing training for our team to use more trauma-informed approaches when working with people who have been impacted by IPV. One outcome of our discussions and conversations that really stood out to me was highlighting the importance of autonomy, which led our team to actually revise our approach, and it's one that I haven't really seen done anywhere else, but highly recommend. We created a bio sheet of the interviewers and had participants select who they were more comfortable being interviewed by, rather than the other way around. And in terms of the overall outcomes of these efforts, our preliminary findings highlighted the importance of mental health care for all, the value of community supports as access points, the legal system's lack of understanding of the complexities of IPV, and the importance of housing as a safety priority. All of these services need to work together to be effective and should not be mutually exclusive. Beyond that, the findings also highlighted that access, knowledge, quality, and value of the services were highly influenced by a person's lived experiences, social identities, and cultures. We're still working on finalizing our findings and hope to share them with our academic and non-academic audiences in the near future. And beyond the preliminary findings, the fourth lesson from this project, which I will continue to reflect on throughout my career, is that the researcher identity should always consider advocacy. And in this context, that means that at any point where knowledge is being generated or research methods are used, I think about how it could evoke meaningful change to benefit the communities we serve. Of course, it's one thing for me to speak about the value of centering lived experience from my own perspective, but to truly capture its impact, I'd like to share with you a snippet of a seminar series we held earlier this year. This clip is from our Waypoint Talks, which brought together our community advisory team members to speak about the importance of lived experience in research. You can scan the QR code if you want to see the webinar in its entirety. Before I end my presentation, I'd like to share perspectives from Haley McDonald, who is the Executive Director of Huronia Transition Homes and one of our community advisory team members. Oh, Sevil, when you share your screen, you have to share the audio as well.
Sorry?
When you share your screen, you have to share audio as well.
Oh no, I
Because
don't.
That's okay. What we'll do is you can scan the QR code and you can actually see Haley's presentation and snippet. We apologize for the technical difficulties.
Okay. So this part of the presentation, Jaden and I will do. Sevil, we also have some videos, but it's okay if we're not able to figure out the audio. Just a heads up. So hi, my name is Nikoo again. I'm also a part of the broader team, but Jaden and I are focusing specifically on our IPV story. So today we'll be discussing how we apply design thinking methods to IPV mental health research. So currently the gap in IPV knowledge translation has largely to do with the fact that there's social stigma, as we have spoken about, that surrounds IPV. And this often results in the silencing of survivor voices. We have seen the need to have a new approach to be able to exchange knowledge with people with lived experiences, build trust between researchers and the community, and also facilitate partnerships to be able to translate the knowledge that we discovered through research. So if we look at the next slide in terms of a paradigm shift, so we wanted to propose a paradigm shift in IPV mental health research. And this is where design thinking comes into play. And we will kind of go through what that means and how we have used it. But together, these three pieces of the puzzle, design thinking, co-research, and participatory knowledge mobilization can work together to achieve the 3 points that we were just talking about in the previous slide. So again, as we know, we will focus on the design thinking piece today. So design thinking as a process is used in many other different disciplines as well, including engineering, healthcare, technology, different disciplines as a whole. But to its essence, it's really a human-centered way of problem solving. It really focuses on empathy and creativity, and it's iterative. So you understand a problem, ideate solutions, and test it quickly to be able to understand where we can improve. In its essence, design thinking keeps the end user at the center of solution development. So that is what we wanted to do as well. So in our work, we have this campaign, an initiative called Our IPV Story. And the name really comes from wanting to amplify stories and inspiring change using those stories. We want to create space for people with lived experiences to feel empowered to share their stories. We're taking a multimodal approach, so combining both digital media and design approaches to improve knowledge translation, as well as having an in-person event to bring community together and having those in-person conversations. So in terms of the ways that we have applied design thinking in our IPV story, we're going to discuss 3 ways in which we have used this. And the first way is through our online campaign, which includes our website and social media design. We will show you those a little bit later. But what we did with the design thinking process, which includes empathizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing as those kind of 5 steps, how we applied this is we wanted to understand our audience's topic interest and design preferences. What would really bring out that safe space that we're trying to create. As well as that, we wanted to think about channels of communication, and we began iterating on how best we can reach our audience of target. We also focused on user feedback. So on the right in the green text, you can see how we use analytics and such as, for example, engagement, likes, comments, and identified the need for being more specific to the unique needs of our target audience through our content. So we'll show you some examples. So the brand design process was interesting because when you think about colors and logos and even fonts, you really are provoking different emotions and bringing to the forefront different ideas that people have about things. So we wanted to share the design process of our colors and logos. So the purple is the main color of our IPV story, and it symbolizes IPV. Green is for healing and hope. And for our logo, we went through many iterations, beginning with the ones on the left to finalize our logo to the ones on the right. So we also wanted to take a modern approach that appeals to our audience, while also keeping in mind that what we want to convey is having the IPV ribbon turn into a pen to symbolize IPV storytelling. Another key objective for this project was to establish relationships and collaborations. So with the internet being so accessible, we're able to reach out to organizations, and we've had the pleasure of working with Ava in the past as well, that share similar values and goals to us, and we can connect with them online. Our online presence also allows other organizations to see us and connect with us. And over the past few months, we've been able to create these relationships that actually culminated in our in-person event, including AVA, Atlas Institute, and Prom Glitz. These connections led to online collaborations on social media, and then also the hosting of the community events where our sponsors had booths at the community events. We'll go into that later as well. The next thing we wanted to show is our website. So we want to invite others to also share their stories and get involved. As you can see, this is the Share Your Story page on our website. Again, the same themes and colors and logos are carrying through. But something specific to this page is that sharing stories is anonymous, and we needed to really be able to convey this message with imagery and also with the text that we used. We have had individuals, survivors, who have submitted stories to be able to be shared with the broader community. Obviously, all identifying information are removed on our end. And this has really ultimately led to a space filled with impactful and important stories. So you can check out our website online from that QR code. And we also have highlights of these stories on our social media. Here's a quote from one of the stories that is currently on the website. This survivor has mentioned that very often when we hear the word abuse, we think of physical abuse. I know I thought this way until my experience. So not only we're encouraging sharing of the stories, we're encouraging broad perspectives and redefining what IPV means to different individuals from different walks of life. And again, to read more of this story, you can feel free to scan the QR code. With one of the modes of delivering information being social media, we invite you to follow us on our social media as well. This is currently on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and you can see the different variety of content mediums that we use on social media as well.
Awesome. And so the second way in which we have applied design thinking to our project is through the hosting of the in-person community engagement event that we held back in August. And so for the preparation of this event, we relied on community engagement, which included connecting with other organizations, as Nikoo had mentioned, and through and by inviting them to join us and be a partner for the event. We also wanted to create a welcoming space to share stories through different mediums, which included art and dance, to a diverse group of our audience. And we also looked at ways to remove barriers to increase attendance. So for our in-person event, it was created to bring together people with lived experience, researchers in the field, and IPV community members and organizations to discuss how partnering with survivors of intimate partner violence can drive transformative research. So during this event, we took a different approach in the sense that art and design played a major role in its development. From the design of our assets, which included the design of our invitations, event slides, posters, floor plans, the placement of our vendors, each small detail was very important for us to consider. We were also very tactical in the design of our agenda and how different speakers and activities, which included a dance performance, a graphic recording of the event, a sound bath, and a world cafe, were key to the success of our event. And to keep the cyclical design process going, after our event, we collected feedback and we'll be analyzing the data to see what can be further improved upon for future events. And so one of the key things that we did at our event was have a live graphic recording. So we partnered with Fuselight, who was able to capture key moments during our event. So this image here shows the first half of our event, where we began talking with talks about intimate partner violence, co-research, the importance of art, and the sharing of stories. And we also provided an introduction of our upcoming project, Mave Hearts. And after the talks, we also had an interactive dance session to promote movement. And we had our keynote speaker, Dr. Samra Safar, who's an author, physician, and survivor of IPV, talk to us as well. And so for the next image shows the second part of our event, which included our World Cafe, looking at how we can meaningfully include survivors in our research, and ending off with the sound bath to ground us as we concluded the event. And so here, there's no sound, but here is a quick recap of the highlights from our event. And so to watch the full video, you can scan the QR code, and the full video is available on our website. Yes. And so the third way in which you apply design thinking is through our knowledge mobilization efforts. So by taking a human-centered approach and keeping the user in the center of our design process, we work to promote accessibility of knowledge mobilization. So some of the ways that we are doing this is through the creation of a report that is magazine styled to share with our event attendees, and by having webinar talks that are made accessible for people who live far away and may not be able to attend in person, such as this one here today. And so with all this talk about design thinking, we wanted to show how it actually interplays with one of our other key components of the framework, which is participatory knowledge mobilization. So together, design thinking and participatory knowledge mobilization enabled through co-research creates a cycle. Through empathizing and co-designing with people with lived experiences, and through the testing and refinement of our ideas with survivors, we can share knowledge in ways that resonates with survivors. This then leads to building capacity within the community to sustain changes, and we begin again to ideate and create more long-lasting solutions with survivors who are at the forefront of our work. And so finally, as an overview of our online campaign, we are currently continuing to work on our website and social media, posting content regularly across different platforms, and working to engage with our audience. We're also continuing to work on collaborations with other organizations to promote all the great work that is being done within the space. And one of the key things that we are doing is we want to promote safe storytelling by providing opportunities for people with lived experiences to, again, anonymously share their stories, which has been pivotal in our goal of incorporating survivor stories in our knowledge translation and mobilization efforts. And now we'll pass it over to Sevil.
Thanks, Jaden and Nikoo. So I'll now move on to talking about our Mave Hearts initiative. So what does Mave Hearts stand for? It stands for Mental Health Anti-Violence Hub for Empowerment, Advocacy, Resilience, and Trauma Support. So through this project, we're aiming to create Canada's first mental health-focused anti-violence hub, which will be essentially a centralized online space that includes services, training, and resources for people affected by intimate partner violence. And it's not just meant to be a website, it's meant to be a coordinated pathway to care, learning, and connection, really grounded in lived experience, equity, and safety. So the project is comprised of the 3 sub-projects that you see on the screen there, and I'll go through each of them one by one. So sub-project 1 is evaluation of updates and enhancements to ODERA 101. So ODERA is the online training program for the Ontario Domestic Assault Risk Assessment, and it's a structured tool used by police, courts, shelters, victim services, healthcare providers, and other frontline responders to intimate partner violence. And it helps assess the risk of future intimate partner violence. So what we're doing is making enhancements to the ODERA 101 in 3 different ways. So the first step introduces a new module, and it's going to be called Treatment Needs and Evidence-Based Treatment Planning in Intimate Partner Violence. And it'll focus on addressing the specific needs of individuals who may have perpetrated intimate partner violence, using evidence-based content to support appropriate identification of treatment needs and planning for interventions. The second piece of the project will modernize the existing ODERA e-learning module on a new platform with enhanced interactive features and a modern design. And we expect these upgrades will improve learner engagement, comprehension, and completion. And finally, we'll be evaluating the program to make sure that these changes produce that desired training effect, improve accessibility, and also don't introduce new barriers. And we'll also evaluate learner usage and satisfaction with the updated and new modules and their accessibility experiences on the new platform through a feedback survey. So why does this matter? Well, the current ODERA training program platform is outdated. The updates will ensure that agencies and staff responding to intimate partner violence have continued access to the training, certification, and resources, and also that the established standards for certifying ODERA users are met or even better, exceeded. So I'll move on to the second sub-project of our Mave Hearts initiative, and that's focused on developing the Lived Experience Advocacy and Partnership Program, otherwise known as the LEAP program. And it's an online training that will equip individuals with lived experience of intimate partner violence to become co-researchers, community leaders, and advocates who contribute their expertise to research and partnership initiatives. And we'll be building the LEAP program through a phased collaborative approach. So first, we'll work to understand survivor needs by conducting a scoping review and gathering input from survivors and our partners. Next, we'll move into a co-design using design thinking workshops and panel advisory feedback to shape the content and delivery of the program. Then we'll actually build the program, including the course content, a safety plan, and a facilitator guide in partnership with Ontario Shores Recovery College. And finally, we'll test and refine the program through a pilot, making improvements along the way. And throughout this entire process, we'll be using a participatory action research approach, meaning we'll plan, conduct, review, and refine in partnership with survivors so that those most affected remain equal contributors at every stage of this work. And so what are the benefits of a program such as LEAP? Well, first of all, it will teach survivors of intimate partner violence advocacy and empowerment skills. It'll help them develop the skills to make informed decisions when they're choosing to participate as lived experts. And it'll also strengthen survivors' understanding of their rights and responsibilities in these roles, supporting safe, informed, and meaningful involvement in research and community projects. And last but certainly not least, we have our sub-project 3. This is a big initiative with lots of sub-projects. And for this one, we'll be focused on developing, implementing, and evaluating a clinician training program. And this program will be designed to strengthen the capacity of mental health professionals to recognize and respond to intimate partner violence in clinical settings. The program will adapt and build upon existing materials developed by the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children at Western University, otherwise known as CREVAC. So we're designing this clinician training program through these 5 stages that you see on the screen. There will be community conversations that are aimed to explore clinicians' awareness, experiences working with clients with experience of intimate partner violence, and needs related to this practice within mental health settings, including areas that need improvement. We'll then conduct a survey with Waypoint inpatient clinicians, as well as providers from the Ontario Structured Psychotherapy Program, to assess current knowledge of intimate partner violence and its mental health effects, awareness of survivor needs and community supports, confidence responding to disclosures, familiarity with trauma and violence-informed care, and also openness to training, policy, and procedure changes. We'll also conduct focus groups to inform the structure and content of the clinician training program. And again, we'll be using design thinking and art thinking approaches within a trauma and violence informed framework. And discussions will focus on refining topics, teaching methods, uptake, and the integration of all this work into clinical practice. And our research team will translate these findings into development tasks. And we have a professional course design vendor that will lead the creation and production of the training program under the guidance of our research team as well as CREVAC. And finally, we're going to pilot test to assess for feasibility, accessibility, clinician engagement, satisfaction, and usability, and examine preliminary changes in knowledge, confidence, and application. And feedback will guide final refinements before we roll this out in a broader manner. An essential component of the study is the integration of these intimate partner violence focused resources, referral pathways, and clinical guidance into the Waypoint Ontario Structured Psychotherapy curriculum. And the whole goal of this integration is to strengthen the psychotherapy program's capacity to support clients impacted by intimate partner violence, making sure that clinicians have access to standardized, evidence-informed guidance on how to really respond to disclosures, assess safety, and connect clients to appropriate supports. And overall, this sub-project aims to build clinical competence, confidence, and trauma-informed responsiveness among mental health clinicians, as well as to enhance clinicians' readiness to engage safely and effectively with clients impacted by intimate partner violence, while also minimizing the risk of re-traumatization. We aim to apply trauma and violence-informed care and research frameworks to promote safety, trust, and empowerment for both clinicians as well as the clients that they serve. And this work supports the larger goal of broader integration of intimate partner violence education within institutional policy. And the program will ultimately help inform policies and practices that integrate intimate partner violence response into clinical supervision, orientation, and professional development frameworks. So to wrap this all up, we wanted to include this snippet that talks about a key theme across everything that we do, and it's the idea of learning as we go. So this work doesn't happen in a straight line, although the image might imply that, and that this is intentional. So we're building as we learn, co-designing with survivors and clinicians, adapting based on feedback, and really taking an iterative approach grounded in trust and partnership. And a few guiding pillars for us are as follows. Building pathways and supports that meet the diverse needs of individuals impacted by intimate partner violence. Really creating those shared learning spaces through community conversations, events, and storytelling to strengthen relationships and awareness. Equipping survivors, clinicians, students, and researchers with practical skills, including research methods and relationship building. Publishing our learnings and actively communicating our findings. Growing a network grounded in trauma-informed, equity-focused practice that bridges research, care, and community. And lastly, using a multifaceted and iterative approach to build sustainable structures and partnerships that support meaningful change both now and in the long term. So with that, we'll wrap up our presentation. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. If you'd like to connect with our team, feel free to scan the QR code that you see on your screen there. We'd love to continue the conversation. And with that, we'll open the floor for questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this very insightful and impactful presentation. And I believe that the analysis you shared will really broaden our understanding of intimate partner violence beyond traditional frameworks to emphasize identity, community context, and the power of narrative. And I believe that your work challenges us to consider more responsive and survivor-centered approaches in research policy and practice. So thank you so much. And for the audience members, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A chat function. We have had one question come in from an anonymous attendee starting out, I should say, by thanking you for this beautiful presentation. And this attendee is wondering, is there any way we can get involved in these projects?
There is, and as we are working on our current project, we will be building a website and putting out calls in between through our social media channels for community advisory and lived experience panels. So we are very much rooted in community collaborations and lived experience collaborations and partnerships. So once that call is out, we do encourage our community to apply so that they can be a part of our panels.
Thank you so much for sharing this information about how to get involved within the panels. Are there questions from other audience members that you would like to post in the Q&A chat? I do have a couple of questions myself that the AVA webinar team would like to pose, and specifically that The first such question pertains to the, I'm sorry, it pertains to what gaps remain in IPV and mental health research that participatory approaches are uniquely positioned to address from your perspective.
So we approach the issue like a web as well as the solution like a web. And it takes a collectivist effort that involves breaking the existing silos for us to be able to not just identify the gaps, but also find the solutions. Um, and that really means working with community, working with different organizations, continuing to learn what's being done, and sharing what we are doing to really, in a way, join forces to be able to hopefully one day eradicate this very pervasive issue. I'll also open the floor to my team members to chime in.
I
Thank you
can
so
add one
much.
more thing. Oh, sorry.
Yes. Go ahead, yes.
Just one quick thing. From a design thinking perspective, what we're doing is also mapping out the journey of the survivors or other individuals who engage in IPV. And really understanding those gaps is really key because a one size fits all approach to mental health, as you all know, does not work. So really understanding that journey from, for example, a clinician perspective, going to the ER, or to accessing community health services, all of those is important. And that's what we're trying to do as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives on potential gaps that remain in IPV and mental health research and for educating the audience about the importance of participatory approaches to IPV research. I'm also wondering if you would be able to share examples of how arts and design-based approaches have deepened understanding or improved knowledge mobilization around IPV and mental health.
I think I can take this one on. So I think what's really unique about arts approaches and arts-based research is the fact that you can use other modes or mediums to share your stories. And what I really find really moving about this approach is that art evokes certain emotions. And when you see a painting or you see a piece of art, the emotions are conveyed to everyone, no matter what language you speak or what culture you're from. And I think sometimes art can express the way people feel and share their stories in ways that words always can't.
Thank you so much for sharing the importance and the important role that arts and design-based approaches can represent pertaining to IPV and mental health research. And my final question relates to, in as a closing question, actually, there is a question that came in from the audience that I will ask in place that Eva has written. Thank you for the work you do. I really think that this method of research is the way to go for IPV as a mental health practitioner. Where can I go to learn more about best practices on working with people who have experienced IPV?
So our project concludes in March of 2027, and by then we will have our clinician training program. But in the meantime, we will be referring and highlighting the work that our community partners are doing. CREVAC does a lot of work in this space as well. And they actually have online training programs, which is why we will be adapting our clinician training program from what is already existing. Again, another example of the importance of collaborations. So I don't know if we can post in the chat, but we can put in the link to CREVAC's course offerings.
That would be great. Thank you. And thank you for also sharing this resource pertaining to the APA guide to IPV among women, and this would be great to share the course offering with the audience. Thank you so much, Dr. Moghimi, for answering this question. Are there any other questions from audience members? Well, to wrap up, I'd like to thank each of you again for your time today and for delivering this insightful and impactful presentation, and also educating myself and other audience members about the importance of specific research methodologies for optimizing the research which was undertaken. And I believe that your work is very valuable for asking each of us, challenging each of us to consider more responsive and survivor-centered approaches to research, policy, and practice, and for policy and practice to be informed by the valuable research that you're undertaking. Thank you so much also for sharing the resources within the chat. And so to wrap up, that please complete for those in attendance, the audience, the feedback survey, which will also be circulated by email, and subsequently that this presentation will be posted on Ava's YouTube channel within the next couple of days for future reference, or if you know those who weren't available to attend as the webinar occurred over the last hour. So thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much for your time today in delivering this powerful and impactful presentation.
Thank you very much.